Welcome to a new kind of listening experience. If you have not already done so, please read the instructions on the back of the record jacket before continuing.
This is a self-help record.
You look lovely. There's a little bit of lag, so I suppose what I'll do is we're mostly here to listen to you, Joe. So, Joe, what?
Well, I don't know. I don't really mind the lag too much because, well, it doesn't seem that big for me. It feels bigger for you, but whatever. It's like millisecond.
I'm sure we'll get round it. Why don't you tell everyone?
Well, go on.
Who
This
you
is
are?
a bit. You're supposed to have the canned laughter at the press of a button. But
No,
you can do the you could do the editing later.
Yeah, I've got the editing worked out. I've even got, believe it or not, I've even got an entertainment lawyer checking out my fair usage policy because I'm sorely tempted to edit after doing my research today on hip hop, which is what we're going to be talking about. There's stuff that I'd like to edit in, and she's going to be getting back to me tomorrow when I put this together to basically tell me what I can and can't use. Because,
well, you know what? I'm of the opinion that you can use whatever you want on Facebook or on YouTube. The only reason being is because the usage of other people's material on your YouTube channel to create a new video, for example, that's unless your channel has got like several million viewers and you've monetized your channel and you're making a substantial amount of money, then it becomes a conversation. But until that time, I would use whatever you want. The only thing you have to get around is those little detectors which have, audio and visual comparisons that can flag whether you're using somebody's stuff,
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I looked at it and it said for review, critique, and research. And I'm basically not putting up with anyone from the hip hop community telling me I can't use their shit, considering their history.
That reminds me. I think I might have told you about there's that website called Who Sampled. Did I tell you about that?
Yeah, you've shown me it several times. We've used it a good few times.
So those people that put that up, I think that's a great. It has a phone. It has an app for your phone. It's all these contributors are throwing their 2 cents in with, oh yeah, I know the sample for that, and I know the sample for this, and it goes kind of in this huge database where you can click on YouTube videos of that stuff, and it'll take you to the sample. Which anyway, Thess One from People Under the Stairs contacted the people from the Who Sampled web and said, take my shit down, man. And they said,
wait a minute,
well, why?
So people know, tell everyone who the People Under the Stairs are.
Yeah, so the people, okay, so Thess One and Double K are there's their two rap names. I think they're from Long Beach, or are they from Long Beach? They're from California. And they started a hip hop group in, I'm guessing, the late 90s or early 2000s. And
early 2000s.
All of it was... Oh yeah, and utilizing the MPC, which is the Akai sampler, and just making really great old school hip hop the way it was made back in the 80s and 90s, which is crazy awesome. And I heard their stuff in the early 2000s and made me want to listen to hip hop again because there was a decline where it was selling Nikes there for a while, and then I was like, okay, back to rock and metal, I guess. And then,
right,
but anyway, so
go on.
So that dude contacted that sample website, Who Sampled, and said, please remove all of those sample sources. I can't remember what the technology, what he said, but it was more like you have to prove whether I Anyway, the irony of it all is you go to the People Under the Stairs bit, and there's like 2 samples, probably the 2 that they paid for, and underneath is the comments, and in the comments section, people are putting all of their samples back up, which he has no control over the comment section, right? So,
Right.
anyway, I thought that was...
that is interesting. We can get back to that, but just for the benefit of people who are listening, if they are listening, you're Joe Watts. You're a good friend of mine. You're a drummer, you're a musician, you're a sound engineer. You're also a keen hip-hop enthusiast. You did a great album, which is a hip-hop instrumental album, which I am using for my soundtrack since you can't afford a lawyer and there's nothing you can do about it. So just tell everyone a little bit about yourself.
As far as my album is concerned, I bought an MPC in 2005, so the year I think my son was born. And I kind of started putting in all these ideas that I had over the years, because over the years I'd hear hip hop songs. And I'm like, oh wow, I have an idea that's really cool, and maybe I'll. Anyway, it took years later. I got one of these things, and I started funneling all my ideas into it, and the outcome was that album that I made in 2009, and my name was Groove Operator. And the album was called Motion Control, and I think there's like 12 or 13 tracks on it.
That's
and
right.
That was just like a funneling of. I'm super proud of it. I loved all the sample choices that I used. Like, also too, because I'm not from Los Angeles or I'm not from New York or whatever, like digging for records is a bit of a, for original sample sources, you need to dig harder because there are no black people here. Like, we didn't have like the 70s. Like, there's no like, there wasn't like a 70s funk revolution here. I mean, people were discovering country music back then in Canada. So our record stores looked a little different. But yeah, I had to find like big band records and find a tasty like horn shot or like, a crazy lick off of a Latino record, or, like I'd have to find cool things in not so cool areas, which ended up being that. Of course, I recorded a bunch of stuff because I was working at a sound studio at the time too. So
I was thinking after looking at it today that being into hip hop and being from Canada and trying to, because you're a scratch DJ as well, like to learn that stuff being that removed from any kind of scene must have been a very steeply uphill battle. It's hard enough to teach yourself anything, but it's even harder when you don't have a scene as a resource to go to where you can ask, how did you acquire those skills?
Wow. You're right. Okay, so I'll go way back when I was like 12 or 13. I got a few seminal albums on cassette tape. One was 3 Feet High and Rising by De La Soul. The other was Paul's Boutique by the Beastie Boys and Fear of a Black Planet by Public Enemy. Those 3 albums I bought just as you did. There wasn't even a rap section yet. I don't know how. I think I bought them in Kmart with my like, I did the chores around the house, that kind of thing, and I bought my cassette tapes. And those made such an indelible impression on me because I had no idea that they were sampling. I had no idea what a sample was or what the gear. Like, I'm a 12-year-old kid growing up in the outskirts of Vancouver, so like there was no one to talk to about that. There was no internet. There wasn't even a publication. And even if there was, it would have been The Source or something talking about rappers, which they were at that time. They certainly weren't talking about production. And I think it was around 2000, maybe late 90s, 2000, when the People Under the Stairs, the Jurassic 5, the Ugly Ducklings, they were coming out with, hey, this is how the old school hip hop was made. And I was listening to it, and they mentioned the MPC, and I'm like, the MPC is, what's that? And again, this is before, what all we have today, which you just plug in a drum machine into your USB. You know what I mean?
Because the MPC was it's partly what we want to talk about, but the MPC was, if I'm wrong, because although I like hip hop, I don't know that much about it. Not in the detail you do. But the MPC was like a seminal thing to happen. That was a game changer, wasn't it? The MPC. Yeah.
So I think I'm not sure which came first, but it was the EMU SP12. which was a drum machine sampler sequencer. Then I think there was the S900. I think that was like a rack mountable key. You know, it was just such an archaic looking thing, but again, super effective for what you're doing. And then there was the Akai MPC. I think it was called the 60. I think it was called the MPC 60, and it was a big, huge, massive. It had a bumper pad on the front. It looked awesome, and it had zero memory. But it did everything that. But I think the original Roger Lynn, who designed the MPC, I think his idea was to like, oh well, you can record your own drums and then put those drum sounds into this machine, and then it can be the drummer, and your band will play along to it. That's I think what he kind of envisioned. He had no idea that people were going to start pumping records into this thing and then editing it. It was going to be the flagship controller for everything. It's not going to need anything else. All my sounds are going to come from obscure records. And again, this is way before the laws had caught up to the technology. So
yeah, because there's so much. Like I was watching, like one of the things we're both referencing here is a BBC documentary called The Story of Hip Hop. There's others like it, but
yeah.
I just finished the third installment, which I had seen before a moment ago, and it's amazing how far what you cover when you look into hip hop. But that one part of it is the lawyers. The lawyers get involved at one point.
Yes.
So explain a bit, but for the benefit of people, like treat them like they don't know, but explain to people like how hip hop developed with the samples, and because one of the first guys was DJ Kool Herc. That's where it kind of started.
He was the guy.
He was the guy. That is the guy. 1520 Sedgwick Avenue in the Bronx.
You remember the numbers? I always forget the address.
dude. Notes. One takes notes. 3 pages of notes to talk to you. But as a starter, so. Just go over like roughly how it started, what hip hop was, and then.
Okay, I think Kool Herc had an older brother. They were from Jamaica, and they'd immigrated to New York. And I believe his older brother was called Mean Gene, and he was a DJ. So by default, the little brother, Kool Herc, had records and a system to kind of use, I guess. But he had parties in his, what I believe was his. The project's community hall.
That's right in the
and
Sedgwick
he'd
house.
have plays
in Sedgwick House,
right in where he lived. Like, and he was one of those guys that would play that kind of gritty funk, like that like the James Browns and like I can't. Yeah, just like the ones with real big fat beats in them. I think he was drawn to that. But I think he was the guy, I believe, that had the 2 turntable set up and had 2 of the exact same record. And he came up with the idea of actually extending the instrumental break part of a record by playing those 2 records and making that instrumental bit longer. Because apparently he said in one of those documentaries, he said he noticed that when a certain part of the song would kick off, people would go mental. They'd be like, "Oh God, yeah," and then they'd get into it. But he wanted to make that bit longer. So, and I think it was that was it. That was as far as his thinking went. He wasn't, he hadn't even considered a culture at that point. It was just some people in his neighborhood playing his dirty funk. And now I think he called it. He's like, tonight I'm gonna try the carousel or something. I think he was called it the something like that, the roundabout or something like that. And people were just like floored.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just finishing it. Like that is exactly what he said. That he noticed that in the breaks on these records, people would go fucking wild. And then
absolutely, and I can only imagine too, because like. First time ever hearing, like you're like, oh, this amazing part of that record, and now it's like 5 minutes long. This is excellent.
Which was an amazing skill to do, because like you're talking about 20 seconds of music, 2 records, 2 decks, and extending that for 4 minutes, which is what that's where the B-boys came for, the breakdancing guys came for. It's amazing lineage. You had that with Kool Herc, and then the B-boys came out of it, and the MCing came out of him calling that, and Like he's still going now. Cool Herc. I just watched the thing with him. He's still going now. He's still on the projects. He's still doing house parties. He's like a Zen monk of it. But that was the.
I was told that he never made a record.
No,
I don't know if that's true or not, but I don't think he ever made a record. Which is what everyone did essentially. You know, Jazzy J, one of those first DJs, he made a record. You know, they all made records. You know.
Well, what made me really laugh is that when you look at the history of it, one of the first genuine, other than the Sugar Hill Gang, which is Rapper's Delight, isn't it? Yeah, Rapper's Delight, the Sugar Hill Gang, which had a bit of controversy because the guy who rapped over it allegedly stole his lyrics off another guy. I mean, that's the other thing with this. There's so much detail. This is probably like a fucking 3-episode podcast, but one of the first genuine original rap records was Blondie and Rapture.
Yes, absolutely.
Which is amazing.
But the irony, because the irony is that apparently when hip hop was getting big, it was moving out of the community halls and into the clubs downtown. But the first few people that were approaching the club owners, you know, they were saying, well, you know, we're going to be doing our hip hop thing. Well, in fact, there wasn't even a name for it, but they're like, oh, well, what are you, a band? Well, no. So you're a DJ? Well, no, it's more than just DJing. So apparently they had to share their venues with the punk scene.
Yeah, that was an amazing thing. I just watched that.
And guess who was in the punk scene? She was straight up. Yeah. She was all part of that CBGB's crowd, or late 70s in New York, right?
And she was friends.
So
with
it's no wonder that she became friends with her. And also too, the Beastie Boys. They were a hardcore band, like
first of all, yeah.
And when they're asked about their transition into hip hop, they were just like, well, it's just what we were doing. And by we, they were talking about our crowd, and all of our friends were transitioning from, you know, they still love the punk and the hardcore and stuff, but there's this new hip hop thing that we need to get in on, and they did. And the crazy coincidence is that those 3 white kids from Manhattan or whatever, they're the ones that made an indelible mark on hip hop, because in my own opinion is those are like they're the ones that put out the Sgt. Pepper of hip hop, you know, with Check Your Head. And
that's a bold statement, Mr. Watts.
But it's, for me, it's totally, I loved that record. Like, I loved it. Well, I still love it.
Yeah, I do now. I listened to it today. I put the People Under the Stairs on. I put on Check Your Head, and it's just amazing how good it is. Like another thing that when they set up these, so hip hop started on like the projects, and it moved to the clubs where it was sharing it with punks. So there's kind of a shared history there. But the big guy was Afrika Bambaataa, and what I found really interesting about Afrika Bambaataa was like he was like the Sun Ra of hip hop. But the records and the cuts he used to use, like he was using the shadows and all sorts of strange stuff that you wouldn't associate with hip hop. And I do remember a quote from Gary Newman when he was in New York in the 80s. He said he went down to that part of town and he was shocked to find that they were like using his records. You know, an English guy, Gary Newman, you know, doing what he did hear Afrika Bambaataa playing his records.
Yeah. There. In fact, which one is that one? There's a break on one of his records. It's like a super space-aged 80s funk break, but there was that was the beautiful thing about it, because it didn't matter where your source came from. It could have been a record made yesterday, or it could have been made in the 60s, or it didn't make any difference. Like, it was, if it had that sound that the hip hoppers wanted to break on, like do their, you know, to freak the crowd out, then that's what they used, you know? So it's same with like, I Got the Big Beat by Billy Squire. Like it's been used in the UK. Who used that? Dizzy Rascal. He used that in his, and it's still being used. You know.
Well, another thing that made me laugh is that how many times the John Bonham drum beat from When the Levee Breaks gets used. It's just been used untold amount of times. And what also made me laugh is that one of the biggest, like the most popular b-boy, the breakdancing breakbeat, was a cover of Apache by forgive
Yes.
me if I get it wrong. The Amazing Bongo Band or whatever.
Michael Wiener's, I think it's Wiener's. Michael Wiener's incredible bongo band,
That's
which
right.
was never even a band. In fact, there's a documentary on that, which you should definitely watch, made by a guy from Vancouver. And here's another little piece of information. But I was speaking to the owner of, this might be hearsay, but the owner of Neptune Records in Vancouver, and he was saying, whatever that guy's name is, Dan something. Apparently he acquired the rights to that song whilst making the documentary, which strangely was narrated by Gene Simmons. Like, what the hell would why would you choose Gene Simmons for that documentary? I want to hear Questlove talk about it, or Mos Def, or Q-Tip talk about it, not fucking Gene Simmons. Anyway, yeah, what were we saying? That's a whole chasm of information there, and just the whole the information surrounding that crazy situation. Because apparently it was Michael Viner got a couple of songs off of the soundtrack for The Thing with Two Heads, which was some stupid B film that no one ever watched. Yeah, and off of that, I think he managed to. People really liked this. It was bongos and drums were the centerpiece of his music, and then he made that first incredible bongo band record, which I can't remember what it's called.
I think
it had Apache on it.
It was the Apache. I think what I found. That's why it's hard to know where to start, because when you look at the history of hip hop, which actually started in the early 70s, which shows you how bad my recollection can be, but I thought it was way younger than that. But it did start in the early 70s, and it went very rapidly from DJ Kool Herc doing house parties with his sound system and lifting that Manhattan 2-deck thing. It went from that very, very rapidly through a lot of stages to the point where, the first rap record was obviously the Sugar Hill Gang Rapper's Delight, but then Afrika Bambaataa brought out what was it that he brought out? God, what was it called? Planet Rock.
Yes.
That was that. It moved through stages really quickly to the point where it's almost hard to keep up with not only how quickly the form developed, but how far it reached. Because I was also surprised that, like, when you look at Run DMC's first album, that was a rock rap fusion album.
Well, the whole Run DMC thing too, because I was told that they never wanted to do Walk This Way with Aerosmith. That was, and again, that's like 84 or whatever. But if you go back, like the Rock Box, and you hear that song, and it's got a guitar solo on it, that was their attempt to get their music played on MTV, which was totally white male rock dominated. You know what I mean?
Well,
Michael Jackson had having a hard time playing fucking Thriller. You know what I mean? If Michael Jackson had a hard, good luck, Run DMC. You know what I mean? Like,
but they were the first they were the first rap act on MTV, because you were totally right. Like, MTV was packed to the gills with just Dire Straits and like white rock. You know, it was because no one really took rap seriously.
No, they didn't. But you see too, like when you've seen that video too of them, like there's a bust of Mozart or whatever, and they I don't know, do they push it over or they spray paint over like Elvis or something?
Yeah, and they knock over heads of the Beatles, and it's a total fucking flipping the bird to everything.
That was awesome, and that was kind of what they were about. They were like, it was like black people's punk music, and punk was already frothing, and you know, it was around 77, I think punk was at its zenith, you know what I mean? And 75, 76, 77, like hip hop was there. It was already formed and going through it was still an adolescent, but it was, so the likes of Run DMC was very much the second and third phases of hip hop, when everyone's like, oh, the old school stuff, like, see, it's like, actually no, the real old school ones was like Jazzy J on the or Busy B or Spoonie G. Like those are
Spoonie
the cats
G.
that were the first. Spoonie G, like those are the real pioneers, but no one hears of them. No one talks about them.
referred to hip hop and later on in that episode. Like, if anyone's interested in this stuff and wants to catch up on what we're talking about, if they don't know, you can through the usual channels watch the story of hip hop, and it is really, really interesting. But Ice-T, that's what he said. He said hip hop was just the natural heir to rock and roll. He said, I think if I'm paraphrasing correctly, he said hip hop, rock and roll, rock is an attitude. It's a way of being. It's like, nah, I don't want to fucking do that. And he went, that's all hip hop is really. It's just next level rock. And I think he's right, really.
Yeah, totally. He was a bit of an enigma, that guy, Ice-T. Because he was essentially the very first gangster rap from LA. Before NWA had basically set the stage as what hip hop was to become. He was kind of 6 a.m, police at my door. Like he was the first cat to start rapping like hardcore lyrics like that before NWA. Because when NWA dropped, I think that was like '88. So then we're talking. We're already.
Was that late? Was it 8? I think it was earlier than '88, man. Oh no, actually, that sounds about right. Actually, that sounds about right.
No, I think. Well, the first one I think was NWA and the Posse, which I think was like '86. But I think that was the one where 8 Ball was on it. Is it 8 Ball? Whatever it was, but the real Straight Outta Compton, I think that was around '88, I believe. And that one was game changer. And I remember an older brother gave me a cassette tape of that, and I couldn't believe it.
No one could.
Well, I couldn't believe he could say fuck that much in one song. And then, but the beats were undeniable. Like, who's at the helm here? This is amazing.
But like, I think that's when you. Yeah. Like, it's hard for us to cover it because so much went on. But so hip hop was a New York thing. It was an East Coast thing. And it was developing over there. How did gangster rap come around? But that's what happened, is that on the West Coast, LA was just, there was no West Coast rap. And then suddenly, around like the mid-'80s, Ice-T comes out, and that's the first. That track is the first gangster rap album track, really.
Yeah.
Followed Hot on the Hills by NWA with Straight Outta Compton.
That was a game changer. There was lots of other like rap acts happening in Los Angeles at that time, but none of them gained as much speed as those guys did. Because
if you call your band Niggas with Attitude, and the first track is like straight out on the album, it's Straight Outta Compton, Fuck the Police. That's attention grabbing, to say the very least, especially when you listen to the content of what they were talking about. Like, that was a massive departure from hip hop. I think that's what people forget, is that not only when it got to the West Coast was it different, it was a departure, and quite shocking for the pre-existing hip hop community. It was still about street life, and it was very, like, if you like, real. But when it got to the West Coast, it certainly, like, they meant it. It took a real extreme turn.
Yeah, they and plus they were young men then, and they were pissed. They were pissed off at their environment, I'm guessing. I always listening it from another world. I'm white, living in Canada. I thought that it was. I didn't really know what to think. I just liked the fact that they were swearing. That's how old I was. I was like 13 or something. But the production too is like, it wasn't Too Short, right? Too Short had that very simple. I heard Too Short, and I heard a couple other rap bands before NWA, but it was NWA that made me really go, wow, this is something else. Like, this is.
Well, what was surprising?
This is a platform for
What was surprising as well is that when it blew up, and it caused them trouble later on, is that it was mostly
Big
being purchased by suburban white people. That was
Yes.
some people who was really funding it. I mean, obviously it was being bought by like their local community as well, but it was really popular
Yeah.
with young white kids, and that caused a great deal of consternation. I mean, people were genuinely,
Yeah.
because not long after came out the Public Enemy album, which was much more politically driven. I mean, and they had their own security team, man. S1W, you know, black clad. Like, it must have been. I mean, even now when I watch it and I think back, because I forget about it, it's like, wow, that must have been absolutely terrifying for middle America. Because Chuck D meant it. I mean, I've seen a documentary on Chuck D, and his attitude was like, if I think he said, you know, if my girlfriend likes it, if my girlfriend doesn't like it, it's good. He said he was sick of what had happened to R&B and soul. He was sick of the Luther Vandrosses. Everything was really like just middle of the road and appealing, and they purposefully went into the studio to make something that was like atonal and jarring, and then on top of that was these really ideologically driven and political lyrics. And to move from what was happening on the East Coast to that almost overnight was very
Yeah.
explosive.
Yeah. Also, too, I don't think it would have worked if they didn't have Flavor Flav. You needed a jester in there to balance it out, because otherwise it would have become just so political, and because they were essentially the Black Panthers of hip hop, right? Which was cool. But man, Flavor Flav, he was with his crazy moves and his clock and his white tracksuits and
the grill. We had the grill.
The whole
golden
package
grill,
was-
yeah.
he had the grill, and then the Bomb Squad at the helm making those production, which was like, it was just like Armageddon going off in your speakers, man. It was
Well,
again something your parents hated. Your
Yeah.
parents hated. They hated it. My parents hated it so much. Like, it must have been weird for them, because like I loved it so much. Like,
apparently their recording
No.
technique, who was one of the guys in it? I can't remember his name, but he was saying their recording technique was they'd go in and it was one of them on the decks, one of them on
Yes.
the drum machine, Flavor Flav on some kind of sampler, and they would just make this fucking cacophonous din. And he said out of his own mouth, it was shit. He said it sounded fucking horrible. It sounded absolutely fucking horrible. But what they would then do is go into the booth afterwards and sift through this horrible din, and then they'd find it. They'd find the hook. And then that
Holy
would be,
Grail.
Yeah, they'd find the Holy Grail, and that would be what the track was. And then Chuck would, you know, channel Che Guevara and Malcolm X and do his fucking bit, and you'd never heard anything like that. They were dropping the N-bomb everywhere, plenty of swearing. What was the name of that album? It takes a nation of a million to hold us back. There was just nothing about them they compromised nothing.
Yeah. Those. That's funny, because I actually bought Fear of a Black Planet first, because of that's kind of one. And then I went back and got Yo Bum Rush, the show, and then I got It Takes a Nation of a Million to Hold Us Back, and I could actually hear their evolution, because they were become quite sophisticated by the time they got to Fear of a Black Planet, because it was just sample collage at that point. It was just insane. But yeah, Public Enemy are a major piece of the hip hop tapestry. You know what I mean? Like, they're major players, and I had the good fortune of being able to randomly meet Chuck D in.
Really?
I was just about to go into the art. What is it? The museum in not Covent Garden, in Trafalgar Square, with my mom and dad, and I'm just like, you know what, Mom, Dad, I don't really fancy doing this right now. I'm out. So I gave him a kiss, started walking around into Leicester Square, and Chuck D's standing on the corner, all on his phone.
No way.
And I look at it like, I'm just like, what? And then I rock right up to him, and I'm like, dude, Chuck D, what? And, you know, fist bump, hand clap, all that, and I just like, but
Was he looking
first
at
thing
you
I
weird?
said out of my mouth was, I was like, dude, what the fuck are you doing in London? And he said, well, actually, I'm here promoting a friend of mine's film called The Art of Rap. It's by Ice-T. I said, I've heard of that. I want to go see that. And he's like, and then I said to him, I'm like, dude, back at home, because I'm from Canada, but I'm living here in the UK. And he said, I said, I've got every one of your Public Enemy's 12-inch singles on vinyl. Like I have Terror Dome on 12-inch. I've got 911 as a Joke on 12-inch. I got all the 12 inches for Public Enemy. And he's like, oh, so you're like a DJ? I'm like, yeah, kind of. Yeah, I just love hip hop and stuff. And then he kind of moved to the side and did one of these to a PA that kind of came out of nowhere. And he said, get this man some tickets for tomorrow's night show. And I'm just like, oh, right. So he gave me tickets to see The Art of Rap by Ice-T. And I went to that night. I went. It was in Hammersmith Odeon. And there was Raekwon, I think it was Raekwon, Marley Marl, Ice-T, Chuck D, and I think one other guy. And they all did like a small performance. And then the British press was asking them questions, and they were the dumbest fucking questions I'd ever heard in my life. And in fact, Ice-T said, hey, listen, because someone's like, how come Jay-Z isn't in this movie? And he said, hey, look, I'm sorry that your favorite rapper isn't in this documentary, but I'll tell you one thing, your favorite rapper's in this fucking documentary. But it was just like, okay, cool.
But getting back to the which like maybe some people don't know, but in the early days of hip hop, so you told this story the other day. You kind of a very brief paragraph history is that the early albums when hip hop actually started making albums, there was so many samples
and before
on it.
That, there was cassette tapes of parties, cassette tapes sold on street corner of the party. That was.
But the first actual albums by artists where they was using samples to make their tracks, there'd be like 50, 60 samples on it, and that went on for a while. And that's why hip-hop of a certain genre sounds a certain way. And then it had to stop because the lawyers got involved. Yeah.
So you remember, I think you and I, when I was crashed out on your floor, we watched Everything as a Remix. And you remember that piece where the sample trolls came out. And like there were these bodies that would just form just to buy up old records that they knew had been used as sample sources, and then they'd buy the licensing for it. What am I trying to say?
The copyright.
Yeah, and then they'd just do a copyright and just do a smear campaign on everybody. So that was happening more and more in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s. But it wasn't until, from what I understand, it was Biz Marquis's use of Alone Again Naturally by Gilbert O'Sullivan. And apparently he won a Grammy for that album. And he was a big, serious songwriter guy. And apparently Biz Marquis did a song called Alone Again, didn't even change this, and did a parody of that song. And didn't ask permission, of course. You just didn't, right? You just put out your shit. And he got dragged into court, and this guy wanted to shit on him from a great height, and that's exactly what he did. And apparently that was back in 1992, and that set the precedent so that from there on in, because before there was always a gray area. Well, if you sample 2 seconds, or if it doesn't sound like there was all that stuff going on. Now it's like if you use anyone's sample and you sell your record, you have to clear it. It's simple as that. So that's, in my opinion, I believe that the sound of hip hop changed so drastically from those early 90s to what it is today, because it went from collage samples, like just crazy, like the Sgt. Pepper of hip hop,
kind of Dada-esque.
The other one too was the other one too was, I believe, in De La Soul did. They cleared all. Apparently they cleared all, but they used one sample by the Turtles that was just a throwaway track. It was just an interlude type thing, and someone clocked it and told the Turtles, and the Turtles were like, "Nope, you're not using that," and took them to court. And again, it cost them a fortune. And this whole hip hop game was being now viewed in a totally different light, because what once was a payday now became like, okay, people are getting sued hard here, and it still goes to today, like, but it's, we live in a different world now.
I remember because I watched Everything Is a Remix, and for anyone watching this, you've got to go and watch Everything Is a Remix. It's a great 25-minute documentary. That guy's made some really interesting stuff. I was watching his website, but talking about that it became an industry, a kind of litigious industry in itself, like you said, that there was these guys bought up rights and kind of hunted down samples. And on Everything Is a Remix, they show you a case where on one hip-hop track they use the most innocuous sample of something that it's you can't even detect it until someone points it out, and they fucking jumped all over their head. They was like, no, boom, that's ours. You need to give me some money, son. And like you say,
I think it was Funkadelics, Get Off Your Ass and Jam.
Right.
I think it was that.
That is.
And it's got that guitar. Yeah. It's got that. And that 1 second of audio was, I mean, lots of people have used it, but it's so, it's it's ridiculous thinking that
had it coming, because even like you said, like was it Ice Cube or whatever, like that. They rinsed the whole of James Brown, then they rinsed the whole of Funkadelic, And I suppose, like, the other side of the coin is if you're George Clinton sitting there, trying to fund your crack habit, and you're hearing whole successful albums being made out of your life's work being reimagined and like collaged together, you're probably going to call a lawyer, because they really did rinse it. I think there is another side of it. They got to a point where it's like, wait, as though it was great and I still like it, they were rinsing it.
Yeah. There's other funny bits too, like the Beatles sued the Beastie Boys when Paul's Boutique came out over the uses of back in the USSR, and they smashed a bunch of their Beatles tracks together, and that was thrown out of court. They were like, these pieces are not even, musically, it's so inconsequential, these things. So they lost. The Beastie Boys actually won.
Wow.
But that actually didn't stick. It only take one to make the precedent that everyone relies on,
So like the next,
and I think it was.
Go on.
I was just gonna say Biz Markie, who was one of the first heads, in hip hop.
So like the other big development with hip hop, and like if we grew up in the 90s, but even going back over it, I didn't realize I forgot how much of a big part of our life it was. But when it moved over to the West Coast, and you started getting NWA and Public Enemy, it was the controversy that was selling it, and it was the controversy that was selling it, as we just said, to like urban white kids. And then there was the Rodney King incident. What happened was, so Rodney King got assaulted by some police officers. The police officers got off scot-free, and kind of around the same time, and I can't remember what exact reasons were, but Ice-T had made a track with Body Count, which was actually a metal track called Cop Killer.
Yes.
Fucking dog shit track.
It was.
There was the riots over the police officers getting acquitted for what happened to Rodney King. And if anyone don't know what happened to Rodney King and don't know about the LA riots, look it up because it's shocking. But then Dan Quayle comes out and basically says, it's Ice-T and these guys that's incited this violence. And that ended up, there was a lot of pressure on his record company to get rid of the track, even though it had been around for like a year and no one was interested. Ice-T withdrew it of his own accord and then come back with his own album. And then it seems that the West Coast guys were very aware that the controversy is what's selling the music. And that's when you start seeing the gangster rap that we all know and kind of love really emerge and take shape.
Okay, I have to now Google when that was, because as far as I was concerned, Straight Outta Compton had been out for years,
Yeah.
and the Rodney King shit kicked off, and they were like, "See, we're not just talking out our asses. Like, this shit happens all the time, like,
Yeah.
and it's a reality." The whole sensationalism just, I think, ended up just being another way to boost the record sales, much like Two Live Crew. They had banned Me So Horny, and
Me So
you know what I mean? Like, it was just a record, you know what I mean? Like, it's just people talking on a record, and I love Frank Zappa, who, you know, he was on, what is it, like Dateline or whatever, and he's being, and they're saying, oh, you're basically a smut peddler, you know, you with all the filth that you put out, and he says it's words. They are words on a record. I can't impregnate people. I can't create it. They're words on a record. They're not actions. They're words. You know. Stop treating words as if they're something other than that. You know, it's like it's the first time black people are angry on a record, and that's what
Exactly.
I think the establishment thought. Oh my God, they're coming to get us. You know what I mean? That was the real fear. But it just so happened that the music was just as powerful, like, and just as awesome. Because me as a kid, my own experience, I had no idea what they were on about, like, because I didn't come from that reality. But the music spoke to me, like those beats. I wanted to know what is that? Where do those drums come from? And then I found out, oh, it's actually Impeach the President by the Honey Drippers. I'm like, well, what about this fat break? Oh, that's Melvin Bliss's Synthetic Substitution. Like, these really obscure 45s, like that. What to me I thought was like, these guys are geniuses. How are they unearthing these crazy stuff? But it turns out that that's what they had at their disposal. Like, their parents listened to that shit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, my white parents from England weren't listening to Funkadelic, man. They were listening to, you know, my dad was a mod in the 60s, and, you know, he was listening to The Who and the British Explosion, you know. But they weren't, you know, like, black people in the States were listening to, you know, blues, funk, soul, gospel, like, and it just so happened that hip hop is a derivative of all of those things. It was born out of that stuff. So it had to be good because the funk is good.
Yeah, of course.
I got to say though, the funk got cheesy in like '81 with all their synthesizers and stuff. You know, and I love Prince. I think Prince is great, but, you know, I'm not a huge Prince fan. I'm not like, I never was like a, you know, same with I don't know. To me, that he was like Hall & Oates.
The problem with
Yeah,
Prince
like-
is when you've got someone that's that good and that prolific, inevitably what happens is that the amount of stuff they produce, the shit outweighs the good. But that's simply just because of the sheer amount of it. Whereas if he'd have just released the gold, you'd have been just amazed. I mean, that guy wrote so much music.
And for other people.
Yeah. But why I brought up about the how it became like the controversy ended up selling West Coast hip hop is that it was a double-edged sword. It was selling the records, and it lent into the hands of kind of conservative America that was what rap music was. When actually it wasn't. It was like you were saying the other day. There was There was like these little groups, weren't there? There was the Native Tongues and the Soul Assassins. It was a mini splendid thing, and to make out like not only to pretend to the public that rap music was from that area, and it was only about, you know, arse and titties and gut. It just simply wasn't. There was way more of it than that. In fact, there was way more on the other side than there was on the gangster rap side.
That's what I kind of remember going into, what was it? Sam Goody, I think it was. There was an American chain in Canada that sold, and they started to have, I think it was called rap music. That was the genre. It wasn't hip hop yet. It was still just rap music. And I remember there being an article in the early 90s, I think it was like Time or something, with Snoop Dogg on the cover, and it was like, is rap music real music? You know, that was like the question back then, you know. The answer is of course it is.
is.
You know what I mean? You might not like it, but it absolutely definitely is. And people were saying, "Oh, well, they're just stealing people's music, and they're because it's easy." And those people that say those kinds of things are just so far removed from understanding what actually is going on. You know what I mean? It's like saying, and I've heard it. I think it was actually Hank Shockley, who you were talking about.
That's it, Hank
part of
Shockley.
the Bomb Squad.
That's right. That's also.
Yeah, he was like saying, I think it was him that said, "Well, if I go out and take a picture of a scene or whatever, is the person, and there's someone that's going to paint it. Obviously, it takes more skill to paint the picture of the scene. So does that make the photographer less have less worth, or
Yes,
or
it
his
does.
medium not good as being a photographer is just as important, you know, as any other medium. You know what I mean? Is it easier to click a picture? Sure, it is, but there's so much more to it than that, you know.
It reminds
Plus,
me. Of,
there's
go on.
there's a lyric from Thess 1. I can't remember which rap song it was, but he says in one of his lyrics, it says something we hear loops that they can't, and we free the souls of indigenous chants, or something like that. But it's like it was absolutely true, because my mother and father, I'd hear something from like the 60s or 70s. I'm like, oh, listen to that. Look at that intro. That deserves to be its own song. You know, like loop that up and add some hip hop drums. They're totally don't know what I'm talking about. Like, and I knew that I was part of a generation that where hip hop was our way of listening and hearing music. You know, it was crazy.
Well, I have that
You know?
ear now, like, and I think it's because if you grow up with hip hop, you develop that ear that I hear little snippets of a thing, and I'm like,
Yeah.
that's an idea on its own. I think it reminds me that people have the attitude towards it in the same way that some people have the attitude towards jazz. When people go, "Oh, well, it's just a noise." It's because you don't really know what you're talking about. Because, like you say, I remember you showing me a documentary about, I can't remember what band it was, but with the MPC and the guy building the loops and building. And you pointed out to me, you went, look, that's that track that you were talking about. That's that track you were talking about. I was like, oh, fucking shit, yeah, that is. And by taking the photographer analogy, I suppose one of their main skills is taste. They have taste. They're exceptionally tasteful. They can see something in a thing that you simply cannot see. And if that don't count as art, I mean, we all borrow. When I play guitar or when I do stuff like that, I'm throwing at you basically a remix in my head of a load of stuff that I've stolen over 25 years. So when an idiot says that, the only reason why I can say that is because they can actually point to a copyright or something that a lawyer's pointed out, because otherwise you wouldn't know.
Yeah, and like it says in Everything is a Remix, they said you have to become fluent in the works of your domain, which means you have to copy everyone else's stuff before you get your own expression. But even then, your own expression will be filtered through all of the things that you've heard and all of the, you can't help it, because we're living life through time and living through these things. I look back on those years and I was just a kid. In a lot of ways, I wish I was like 20 something growing up in those early years, because I would have bought an MPC right away. I would have maybe beat some of these guys to the punch when it comes to finding crazy records.
I mean, your album.
I always think of
your album is really good, and I'm not saying that just to be nice, but it is really really good.
Cool.
And again, it's
and the truth is,
taste.
Yeah, I just, that was me really wanted to like make a hip hop record that felt like an old hip hop record, and I think I kind of got away with that.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, because it was 2009 when I made that, so it was like, it's not like, but I wanted it to be like, there was always like answering machine messages and shit on hip hop records, or like little skits and stuff on hip hop records, and I just love that stuff, and then And one of the best ones was Dr. Dre. I mean, he always for the Chronic, it was so full of sources and material. I was just like, this is incredible. I actually heard that he had people working for him, just scouring records to find crazy loops. I actually heard that some people had jobs doing just that, and that he would take their ideas and perfect them.
I find that totally believable.
I don't know if that's true or not.
That sounds totally plausible to me.
Yeah, I totally think so too.
I just find the history of hip hop, considering when it started and how it touched on so many genres. You know, like Afrika Bambaataa, like his first album was pretty much an electronic album. It was pretty much an electronic album.
He was into Kraftwerk. You know what I mean? Like that was the beauty. Also, too, I was going to mention before, like, look at what all those cats were wearing back then. They were wearing like leather pants and like fur collars and studs. You know what I mean? Like that is, again, not what you think of when you think of rap, you know, or hip hop, you know. And that was an integral part. It was all about rocking and shocking, you know.
Hanging around with them punks, that's what it is. Hanging around with those punks. I was like, yeah, actually, we can wear what we fucking like, man.
Exactly. They probably were highly inspired by being around those. And apparently, there's no evidence that there was ever any problems between them.
No, none.
There must have been like two aliens looking at each other, going like, "Wow, you're awesome," and "Wow, you're awesome." Like, you get to be in this crazy world where like the punks. I just can't imagine hip hoppers being in a punk show today and them not being like a riot, you know, or
yeah, that's
a fight.
What I found strange, but totally natural.
That never happened.
No, not at all. They got along fine. They liked each other's music. It was an English white girl in New York who was looking for a club night to set up. That's what she wanted to do, and she came across hip hop, and she was like, "Boom, that's my jam. I'm going to do that." And she put it on. Can't remember what the club. Oh, what was it called? Nizgal or some kind of club. It ended up moving to the Roxy, and from day one when it was in New York in that club, it was full of punks and rap fans, hip hop fans, and nothing ever went down. It was just exactly as you just said. It was a nice meeting of minds, and it makes me wonder. I suppose it did. Maybe it did affect the kind of the couture of people like the Digital Underground and all that, when they started with the crazy clothes and all things like that. I mean, because they were hanging around together.
One other thing that needs to be mentioned about that time was Malcolm McLaren came from London because he heard about this hip hop stuff going on. But it's weird how that, well, A, he was the Sex Pistols manager, B, going out with what's the fashion designer, you know, what's her name?
Westwood.
Vivienne Westwood, and they did that shop together, Sex, on the King's Road.
Yeah, that's right.
So he comes to, and I don't know if I actually own Duck Rock on which is his, and it has Buffalo Gals on that record. Buffalo Gals,
yeah.
Which
Buffalo Girls go around the outside.
It's been sampled, interpolated. It's been done like a million times. In fact, I just heard that even on. I know that Jay Dilla liked to use that. Anyway, but it was such a weird record, and there's huge pieces of the world famous Supreme Team, the radio show, just taken right off the radio and stuck on the album, like, because it was like. That was like the hip hop radio in New York at that time, and it was doing stuff that no one had ever done before, like playing hip hop before it was even called hip hop. It was just, I don't even know what they called it. It was, what the hell would they? It was almost as if everyone was on the same page at that time, and
yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, in a way. I'd
You know?
shit my pants though if Malcolm McLaren turned up. If Malcolm turned up, you just know fucking misery and loss is about to ensue. You know, a proper parasite. But didn't he have when he got to America though? Didn't he, after like looking at that scene, hip hop and punk in New York, didn't he start having a go at like world music and stuff like that? There was literally no pie that guy wouldn't finger.
Yeah, there was that dude, that artist, that kind of renowned kind of hip hop artist. I can't remember his name now, but he was kind of contributing. There was like double Dutch, like black
That's
girls doing the
right.
double Dutch thing, and then there was I think there was a song called Double Dutch too, but yeah, there was like thing, hip hop radio show. You should check out Duck Rock, man. Like it's actually a pretty cool record. It's and I think he actually raps on it, which is probably pretty unfortunate, but overall it kind of captured that time and that mash of different cultures, which was really interesting, and which I still find interesting. And when what's his name, when Pharrell Williams showed up to that awards show wearing that crazy hat, that giant big brown hat that everyone laughed at, I knew immediately that was a Vivienne Westwood hat that Malcolm McLaren wore in the Duck Rock video, and he was referencing that, like, and I was just like, oh, dude, there you go. But the next day, everyone was like, dude, what's up with this hat? What's up with that hat? It looks like a big pile of brown shit on your head, like, which it kind of does, but
it kind of does. That guy
can pull anything off.
No, he can't. That guy cannot pull anything off. I saw him in like what looked like a suede purple romper with red suede sneakers the other day, and I don't care. You don't look good, son. You look like a fucking idiot. You look like a reject of the Muppets. I tell you what I was gonna do as well. Like when you was looking at the history of hip hop, so there was, what was his name? Let me just check my notes. But so there was like pop rap. So like almost hot on the heels of NWA and Ice-T, there was, what was his name? Loke. Oh God. What was
Tone
his?
Loc.
Tone Loc, yeah, and then followed, which was at the same time as MC Hammer, right? So you got this kind of friendly pop rap. But then, look, he's got to be mentioned at some point. Then there's Vanilla Ice, and I'm gonna sit here and defend Vanilla Ice after looking into it, because what happened to him was pretty unfortunate. So he was from Dallas.
He was like, I think it was Chuck D said he was actually a pretty good rapper at that time, and had some credibility and respect, but one of the major labels wanted to get him, but form him into what they thought was a sellable piece of merchandise, really. And that's,
this is a Chuck D.
But they threw a bunch of money at it. What? Okay, go on.
If Vanilla is gonna be the Elvis of rap, I want to own it. And he said that. It was like he used to open for us, and he said he was playing in Dallas. He was playing to, he meant it. And then, like you say, the record company, because pop rap had came around, they saw Vanilla Ice, and they went to him, and he said, "Look, I was 19 at the time." He said, "Like, okay, Vanilla, we wanna cross you over, make you pop," and he was like, "Nah, man, I'm not fucking doing that." And then apparently they just produced a check for $1.5 million with his name on it. And he said, "Look, man, I don't care who you are. If you were me, even I was like 2 payments behind on my 5.0. He went, anyone would have. I went, yeah, what do you want me to do?" And he probably could have ended up being an alright act, but it just didn't pan out that way,
I like everyone else bought that cassette tape, and it wasn't actually too bad. It was actually a pretty good tape, actually. I remember they sampled "Stop That Train." I remember thinking, man, that's a pretty cool. That was one of the the B-sides or whatever. But overall, he was actually not too bad. But he ended up being like a dirt bike king or something, and then trying to get into movies, and
married Madonna.
I think he was
for a
just,
while.
and then fast forward a few years, he's now on a few reality shows, and he's just a bit of a comical thing to watch, really, isn't he? Really. I was gonna say Nardwuar, the human serviette. He's the Vancouver Gorilla interviewer guy. He interviews him, and he seems like a pretty decent guy.
Yeah.
He doesn't seem like he's not full of ego, that's for sure. Unlike Nas and and there's a few other dickheads that Nardwuar interview, and I know that he's a strange guy, but he comes prepared to his interviews, and I feel like if anyone disses Nardwuar in his or treats him poorly in his interviews, the comments are like vicious. They protect him because he's such a great little resource, you know. You know who I'm talking about, right?
No, I don't think I've heard of Nardwuar. That's the problem with the internet.
Okay, you got to
man.
check him out. Okay, so Nardwuar, the Human Serviette, it's like Nardwar. He does these guerrilla style interviews. He just kind of shows up where you are. I think now that he's a little bit more known, he can have them arranged. And I think he actually hooked up with Pharrell Williams. And Pharrell, and if you check out the NERD video with Nardwuar interviewing him, that's when you see how amazing he was, because Pharrell Williams is like, I can't believe this interview. It's the greatest interview I've ever had in my life, and so on and so forth. But yeah, check him out. He does tons of hip hop artists, tons. I think he's interviewed Snoop Dogg like 6 times.
Well, that's what the other thing that's got to get touched on, because like when I got to the third part of this documentary, and you get to the infamous Death Row Records and what was Puffy Bad Boy Records. You get to the whole Biggie and Tupac thing. But it seems to me that those two it's the first time in history someone got killed by a fucking marketing campaign, because one of the things that are similar about Puffy Combs and Suge Knight is that they were ruthless moneymakers. You know, they were really egotistical. Like Suge Knight used to wear red, so like he was apparently, you know, that was so he was a blood. Everyone knew that he was a blood, and he was happy to have that known. There's lots of documentaries on it, but when you look at the kind of, look, I'll come straight out now. I really don't like either of those two characters, Puffy Combs or Suge Knight. They seem to be the harbingers of like the death of what was good about hip hop. As soon as that little gang got involved in it, it became a really narcissistic. It wasn't really about people talking about their lives anymore. They were totally into selling this stuff via controversy, and they didn't care how they fucking did it. They didn't care what they did. And they were kind of like the end of hip hop, I think, or the hip hop that I remember. That's after them. That's when I turned off. I was like, I don't need to know anything about this. I've got my records now.
Yeah, I feel probably the same way. I never really thought much. I mean, I'm sure I kind of obviously feel that Sean Combs was probably a nicer individual than the other guy. But musically speaking, I never thought much of him, because he used to just take hits from the 80s, you know, records that were made literally 10 years ago, and then just because they had a huge hook, it's going to instantly be recognizable. And again, this is part of the time when people were paying for their samples now, right? So, you know, it's not like Sting woke up one day and heard "Missing You" on the radio, and you know, he'd been told about it. It's absolutely terrible, because yeah, I totally agree. There were a few things that I thought were kind of cool, because I kind of thought at that point things were becoming party records again, which was kind of cool, but I don't know, just the way they went about doing it. Like Diana Ross's "I'm Coming Out" became, you know, that, I can't remember what it's called, but
they were
I was definitely losing. Yeah, I was losing interest at this point, and I was getting older too. You know, I'm like, I'm not that, but I wasn't getting as excited as I used to back when I was first listening to hip hop, and maybe that had something to do with my age too. Like, but now, you know, that resurgence in early 2000s with like I said, the Jurassic 5 and the People Under the Stairs and stuff, like that really made me feel like, oh, there are real people out there that just want to make beats because they love beats. And the beautiful thing too about the Ugly Duckling if everyone's ever seen them, they actually got a really big following in the UK. They come and tour every year or two. They don't cuss on their records, you know what I mean? They're not like.
You sound like an old man. They don't. That's what I like about those kids. There's no cussing on their records.
There's no cussing on their records, but they're not using it as a crutch, you know, where many do. Where profanity becomes a thing, where you're just like, you know what I mean? Like, am I a prude? Absolutely not. I swear all the time, but I don't. When I hear it, you know, people using their lyrical ability to construct cool rhymes, like he did. Andy Cooper. I don't need an alias. Stun anyone in 100-mile radius, because I come off quicker than a Snapple top and catch jock like Germans on Hasselhoff. Like, I'm just thinking, like, those are amazing. Like, those are amazing lyrics. Like, yeah. Anyway, it was the resurgence in the early 2000s that made me feel like, wow, okay, people did love hip hop like I did, and are making it again. And Jurassic 5 are similar too. Like, absolutely fantastic. And it's not about guns and bitches and all that kind of shit. It's got nothing to do with that. It's all about I am somebody. You know, like that's a great song by them. Or, you know, Freedom. Like, they've got such a huge roster. You know.
I mean, that was about the same time as you was talking the other day. I was thinking about it afterwards, but that resurgence of, if you like, the hip hop format that you and I know and love. That's when you started getting the "We Need the Money" tours from people like Busta and other people like that. You know, they've been out the game for a while. They've obviously burnt through their dough on Cristal and whatever else, and they just hit the road and come on stage fat and unrehearsed and just mumble through. Tell them about those two. What was those two dreadful gigs that you saw? Like, that you was really hyped to see.
Okay, well, the beautiful thing about one of the beautiful things about living in London was the Jazz Cafe, which sadly isn't there anymore. It closed when I was living there, when I was close to you. And so I had Funk Dubious rock up, and I went with my friend Tony, and we bought Which Doobie You Be in '92. You know, like, we were listening to that, and, you know, Souls of Mischief and Leaders of the New School and stuff like that. But Funk Dubious came up, and they looked rough. And right at the end, the DJ rocks up to the microphone. He's like, "Yeah, so, like, I got a bunch of these belt buckles it says Funk Dubious on them. So what are they worth in England? Like 50 pounds? Who's got 40 pounds?" So he's like auctioning them off at the end of the sale, and people money. Believe it or not, I actually went and bought one, because I was just like, I'm never gonna see this again, right? So I actually bought the Funk Dubious belt buckle. No swag table. They didn't have T-shirts. They didn't have a new album. They didn't have anything. They were just literally exploiting the fact that a bunch of 4-year-olds are going to see them because we had their tape back when we were in high school, you know?
Fucking pathetic.
But I didn't think that it would be that way, because I went and saw, what was his name?
You
again?
went and saw Busta Rhymes.
So Busta Rhymes. Okay, so Busta Rhymes, he came up, and he had a DJ that would only play 30 seconds of each song, which was so anticlimactic. Like, and he'd start like the beginning, and then boom, and I didn't even get to the chorus on some of them, and I'm just like, is this what the duration of the show is going to be? Because I'm out. I don't want, and I paid more because it was Busta. You know what I mean? But yeah, I always felt like, for the most part, hip hop shows were always for the most part, a disappointment, with the exception of a few. I saw Public Enemy on 2 occasions, and they were both, they put out a show. You know, but they've survived on tours too, you know what I mean? Like, and they're still putting out records. So yeah, there's a reason why they're out, you know, been going as long as they have, because they're good, and they try, and they, you know, keep this hip hop flame going, you know. And then there's others that are apparently just riding on the coattails of better ones. I heard that they came to Vancouver recently. Not Dilated Peoples. What's his name? I'm Cool Like That. I'm cool. Like, who did that track? I can't
Jesus
remember
fucking
now.
Christ.
It's let me just look here.
See, that's the
I'm
problem
gonna
with
keep
hip hop as well. That is why it reminded me of funk. Is that there was an awful lot of acts that had great tracks, but then they did like one of like Das Effects. You remember Das? You all effects,
Yes.
live effects, and it was the sample was from
Loved it.
It's Blind Man Can See It, James Brown, and it's a fucking wicked track.
Black
One album, that's it, gone. And there was loads
Oh, that's
of
good.
acts like that. There was loads of acts
Yeah,
like that.
I always liked DOS Effects. I thought they were a great band. They were dissed heavy by the industry at that time because they're all hubbity hibbity hubbity hoo.
Wiggity.
Yeah. But
I mean, like, tell
the
you
truth is that
go on.
they're dope. Their beats were dope, and I'd never heard that rhyme style. It was before the Fushnikins. I remember hearing the Fushnikins with Chip Fu rapping at like 200 miles an hour. But yeah, it was cool. I was actually thinking of Diggable Planets. I don't think they had too many huge hits, but I wonder what they were like. But I was like, I'm not gonna pay to go see, the rebirth of Slick, cool like that for one song. I don't know.
I'll tell you,
There's a couple that warrant.
There's a guy I'll tell you who like everybody knows if they like hip hop. Like I'm a fan, even with music in general. I'll know the band and the album. I don't remember tracks. I don't get into the details. I'm not like that. Pete Rock's Soul Survivor album is one of the best albums I've ever heard, and anyone who knows hip hop knows Pete Rock. But I'm surprised how many times I watch a documentary and he doesn't get mentioned. Very rarely gets a mention. And he put out a lot of stuff. He did a couple of. He was one of the first guys I remember doing just hip hop instrumental albums, which is what you did. Which, I always thought that was a brave move. Like with hip hop, it's like, you know what? We don't. It originally like MCing or rapping over these breakbeats was a late arrival. It was the DJing first, then it was the b-boys, and the MCing and the rapping came late to it. So when people started doing instrumental hip hop, it was kind of going back to its roots. It's like, look, it's just me finding these loops, finding these samples, and building a whole new thing out of it. And his instrumental album was amazing, but very few people mention Pete Rock.
Yeah, no, he's also not like that dynamic of a personality when being interviewed. He's just kind of he always looks super baked too. Like he always looks like, yo man, it looked like he just burnt a whole tree to himself, But speaking of Soul Survivor, that was like 1998, and I was kind of uninterested with hip hop at that point. And then he dropped Soul Survivor, and I thought that was a pretty great record. I agree, and there's that small YouTube video of his brother.
That's the one you showed
Grap
me.
Love. Yeah, and he's sitting with. Yeah. Well, he's got an Emu SP12, and the guy next to him is the Fudge Monk. What's his name? Damu the Fudge Monk. Who, by the way, if you haven't heard of him, definitely check him out. He's an amazing guy. He's a young cat that does the same thing, putting out hip hop the way it was on using the tools that were used, and putting them out now. I don't know how, because all of his stuff is sample based. I don't know how he manages to fly just below the radar for because he's still liable to be sued today for the use of his stuff. But he's on Definition Records, I think, Redefinition Records. But yeah, so that video with Grap Lava is great. He shows you how he did that song. The sample was Joe Sample, I think it was, wasn't it? Joe Sample.
Yeah.
Anyway, well, you can find out what it is on.
But I think
who sampled.
When you're talking about like the revival of it, it reminded me of the after like when you had blues, it moved on to rock and roll and things like that, and it developed into the many splendid thing that it did. When you got back to like the early 2000s and Jurassic 5 and People Under the Stairs, it's because despite what anyone wants to say about it, hip hop is. I think hip hop is as powerful and as important a cultural landmark as what jazz was. It is a clearly definable musical cultural event that has a hinterland, which is that uh, eclectic collage of sampled sounds that is way harder to do than what people think it is. It is not. It is not doing a Puffy Coombs of just, oh, I'll take a hit, I'll lift it, and then I will just spit some dreadful fucking rap over it. The way they mix all of those like little bits in. Yeah, and like
Yeah.
we was like, anyone who remembers it, like that Check Your Head album, like everybody remembers it. The use of a wine tasting record for a track is pure genius.
Absolutely pure, unadulterated genius. I also think, because I found out what all of those sources were for, what's that?
Check Your Head.
You wild man.
Man,
Wild.
wild.
You know where that's from?
No.
Where's that from? That's
Could
Venom
possibly do.
in concert. Fucking Venom in 1980 doing a live show in New York.
How,
They're choosing Venom records.
well, what's
The other one was you see. He goes.
No, what's
Yeah,
the? I'll tell you what
it's
I want
much
to
easier.
know. Yeah, you sleep late.
Alright.
Sleep late, man. It's much easier on your constitution. And what's on the opening of the album? This
That's,
next
that's
one is
National
the first song on our new album.
That's Live at the Budokan
Oh.
by Cheap Trick. You know, like that. All those pieces are. And then there was yo, shut the fuck up, Chico, man. I paint 3 of those murals to get some of that. That's from Wild Style, which of course is a pretty, crazy, awesome hip hop movie from '82 or '83.
And what's
And
the
that was pretty much what it was like.
And what's the other one? Professor, what's another word for pirate treasure? Well, I think it's booty. What
I think
booty?
it's
What
booty.
booty? That's what it is. Yes, I got more
I
gas
actually-
than a fucking bump.
Yeah. Where would hip hop be without simile hyperboles?
Nowhere. I mean, that's another thing. Like, I think when you were saying that about the Beastie Boys, it was Check Your Head that got me into hip hop when I was growing up, because I was into metal, I was into Primus, I was into rock and roll, I was into all of that stuff that a guitarist is meant to be in. I think I just culturally denied myself hip hop, and then Paul's Boutique had been out, License to Ill had been out. Never looked at it. I had MTV, and then.
Yeah.
So I heard So What You Want, Beastie Boys, when that album came out, and that was it. I was sold. And then, because on that album as well, I think that might have been the first time on the hip-hop album, because they used to be a band, they had some rare groove, like funk tracks on it, which are them actually playing the instruments. And some of the tracks on there
Yes.
are them playing instruments over original material. And I think that
Yes.
was the first time that had happened. You had a hip-hop album that was old school, forgive the phrase, plus something new. That amazing scratching, which I think it's DJ Hurricane on Jimmy James. Like, that album, you're right, that's up there with the best albums of all times. Fucking easy. Absolutely easy. If anyone's
Yeah.
never heard Check Your
Easy.
Head by the Beastie Boys, you've got to listen to all of it 9,000 times.
Yeah. I don't know, like, what kids today would think of that, though, like, because they're all into this, like, trap music with, like, simple 808 beats and stuff. And
Could you
like,
explain
I
what
get
that
it.
is?
Some of it's okay.
What's
Well, like,
trap?
it's like overly simplistic kind of beats with it's well, let's see what Google says
Oh,
about
yeah,
it.
I know. You mean shit.
Yeah, I put trap music in, and there's an emoji of poop here.
I love the way Google just captures the zeitgeist when you type certain stuff in. You can put it in, and like if the first thing that comes up is generally what the world is thinking about a thing. Like type in Donald
It says
Trump.
here that trap music is a subgenre that originated during the 1990s from Southern hip hop in the United States. It is typified by the ominous lyric and sound of incorporated double or triple time division hi-hats, which is what I'm talking about. They're heavy into the 808 synthesizer, and but it's, I don't know, it seems like in the recent years it's been incorporated with electronic dance music, so it's kind of crossing over into more dance. It's the best way of describing it, I think, is for you and me when we were growing up. We had the Miami bass. I think it kind of started around there, that's the Southern hip hop. That's when you got those like bass wars and like those bass that music that basically you put in your cars that had huge systems. Well,
that sound, a lot of. Hey, have you heard this one? This one's even better though.
Yeah. This one you actually shit your pants in there. It's awesome.
Have you heard that new track, man? I totally brown trousered myself, dude. It's fucking amazing.
I totally shit my pants, man.
But it was listening to hip hop that allowed me intellectually to accept listening to bands like Massive Attack and Portishead and stuff that didn't have a guitar and a bass and a drum in it. You know, I was really that kind of dick guy. I was like, this. I don't think I would have gone as far to say it's not music, but I certainly was like, I'm not listening to that. And then after getting into, because the two albums that really, like, I remember growing up was Check Your Head was around, and Blood Sugar Sex Magic, Red Hot Chili Peppers. Those two albums around that time just fucking ruled my world. Absolutely did.
Yeah. I think I can't remember like what I was doing at that time, but I definitely remember somewhere down the line listening, just playing out all my hip hop stuff, and I was kind of like wanting something else, you know. So I was going back and looking for sample sources before the internet, which was tough because, you know, I knew a few things but not really, and I was buying like funk compilations and stuff like that, but I was really desperate to find music that I hadn't heard that was 70s, 60s, and like, you know, 70s funk basically. And it was hard to do in Canada before the, you know, now with the internet there's everything, but that's when I kind of started playing in a band. And then it wasn't long after that I came to England. And then that wasn't long after that before I joined a funk band.
Which was No Pressure. Was that No Pressure?
That was No Pressure, yeah.
It's time to tell that story.
Yeah, so I basically played drums in this funk band, and we played all over London, and it was great. That was the first time I came to London. I lived there. I lived in England for about 5 years, I guess. Five, almost 6 years. And it was cool. I really enjoyed it. I mean, I love playing drums, and but
Gordon was our
biggest problem was that's where I met Gordon, who's the bass player, and I'm still friends with him, and Tox Ojo, who was the saxophone player, who I'm still friends with. His brother Banky was the rapper. I'm still friends with him. So I thought I was joining a band. I ended up meeting lifelong friends that I considered like my family now, you know?
Yeah.
And, but we obviously had our issues with the guitar player, because the guitar player at the time was going out with Pam, and I kind of hooked up with Pam and had 2 kids with her, and that kind of wrecked our guitar player. So I think we were kind of looking for guitar players at that point, and we had a few play, and we were always playing shows. We were constantly playing shows. Every weekend we had a show. We did gigs all the time.
Tell the story from when you moved to Waltham Abbey in Essex in 2016.
So I was working at a studio, and my then girlfriend was moving from Cancun with her child to move and live with me in England, which is obviously a huge jump. But I was living in Muswell Hill. No chance I can afford a 2-bedroom flat in Muswell Hill as much as I'd like to, but they were all too expensive for me. So I moved to Essex. I was looking around and I moved to Waltham Abbey. I saw the little town. I'm like, oh, this is kind of nice. This will be all right. So I rented a flat there. And then I think that the night that I moved in, I think I went to the Crown.
Yeah.
And I think that night I saw you, and we ended up hanging out that night and talking about music and books and records and all kinds of shit. And we were like, oh, you're just the same as me. We were the same. Yeah, Insta friend, exactly. So so that was like 3 months of you and me hooking up and going to. It was easy 3 months.
Yeah, easy. These 3 months of like, I've found a new friend. This is really cool. Because for me, to find someone like you who's into the same stuff that I'm in the like deepest, darkest Essex, that's like finding rocking horse shit, man. It's just not possible. And yeah, it was easy 3 months that we were knocking around.
Yeah. I didn't know that at the time because I was like, I've been used to not living in trendy parts of London. I've never lived in like Shoreditch or anything, but Muswell Hill and Crouch End are pretty cool areas.
Yeah.
I like them very much, and there's lots of cool people there. But the minute I moved to Waltham Abbey, I was like, okay, Waltham Cross. You just have to walk around there and be like, okay. I don't see a lot of cool people here. I see a lot of hurting people that are living tough. But yeah, it was good to meet you and that we were close and we were drinking beers after work and stuff like that. But then we met Banky. So,
no,
yeah,
it was
Banky
Tox,
came.
wasn't it? Banky came and then Tox.
No.
It was Tox, wasn't it? Banky.
That's the thing that blew me away is that Banky came along and started talking to you, and again, a whole day went by with us not saying anything. Then Tox came from Australia because he was here for the day, and we went to the pub again.
That's right.
And then you said to him, "Aren't you the saxophone player? Didn't you play saxophone in a band called No Pressure?"
Talking about
and that's
band, and he was talking about his band. Maybe I'm wrong, but he started talking. You was him talking about the band, and then I started remembering his face, and he was a sax player, and that's when I said to him, I went, was the band you were in called No Pressure?
I wish you had seen my face when you saw it when you said that. I was just like, what the fuck do you know about No Pressure? Like how it's not like we were like world famous or anything.
No.
And sure enough, you had played guitar with us on a couple of gigs.
Yeah.
Which blows my mind because I like obviously I remember you, but I don't remember you. It's like we didn't remember what our faces looked like or something.
No, not at all.
Something was, like, and that was how many years ago? Like how many? That was a good
10 at least, if not more.
Easy 10. Like, yeah, like it would be 10 because my son's about 13 now, so that was around the time when he was a little kid. So over 10 years. But we had never seen each other or spoken to each other since.
No.
And here we are hanging out for 3 whole months.
And didn't know that we'd met before. And the worst thing is, out of all the people in the band, I said to you, I drove around in a car with you for a whole day. We was talking about the Beastie Boys. We basically had the same conversation back then that we'd been having for 3 months, right? And like connected.
Exactly.
Right, I went to a house party for a little while with you. We got up to some nonsense at one of the gigs, I totally didn't recognise it until I saw Tox. It was just so strange, so strange.
That was crazy.
People aren't getting this story, me and him ended up meeting each other, becoming good friends, and then only realised 3 months later that we'd met a whole 10 years before and had got on, and for 3 months
and on stage together.
And played on stage. Well, that was what I remember. We did one gig and it went really well, and then we did a gig in Brixton where, for some reason or another, I'm sure my guitar was out of tune. The gig didn't go that well, and on that night, Tox, the saxophone player, broke his ankle dancing on stage.
Yeah, I think he fell off the stage and like smashed his leg. Oh man, I do remember that.
And
also too, I was going through horrible relationship things at that point too. It was all just but it was all part of being young and experience in life. I was seriously under the impression that I'm gonna be a rock. I'm gonna be a funk drummer. But
It could have happened.
It's just the way it is. Yeah. We used to record in where was that? I think it was Willesden Green. Actually, there was a studio there. We really liked the owner too. He was just a good guy. And there was lots of times that he would lay down a guitar bit and then he'd leave, and then Gordon would pick up the guitar and redo his guitar bit because no one wanted, because it was just like okay, forget it. We'll just do it ourselves. So yeah.
And then you left because that's what we was gonna do. We was gonna get a fucking funk covers band together, do some jazz covers, and then you run back to Canada like a flappy-headed pansy.
I know. To be honest with you, there was, before all of that, I remember probably in like early 2000s where there was a group, I think they were called Workshop, and they had an alien head as their thing, and they used to play at a place called the Purple Onion, and it's on Water Street in Gastown. And it was a really cool place. Not there anymore. But they were three guys, only played small little audiences, and they did funk covers, and they were doing obscure funk covers. And
that's the way.
I so appreciate them. I don't know. I never actually found out any of their names, and I just remember thinking, man, they were so good. And like I used to love. I never actually told them just how much I appreciated them, because they played like some classics like Sissy Strut by the Meters, and then they do but they were all instrumental. And they probably had like a Rhodes player, one drummer, and a guitarist, and it was just dope. It was just stupid great. Like I loved it, and I always wanted to emulate that, but I never did. Every band I ever met wanted to do their own version of things, or we'd do a cover here and there, but most of it would be originals, and no pressure with one of those groups.
When I was growing up, that's how I started. When I started learning to play when I was 16, I used to hang around. My cousin knew the guys out of a band in the 80s and 90s called Galliano, which were a great band. Ernie McCone was in it, and a guy called Mark van der Gullit was an amazing guitarist. And there was a band knocking around called the Funkin' Filberts, or the Filberts, and their drummer was a guy called Charlie Creed Miles, who pretty much taught me to play once I stopped having lessons at around 14. And that was all they used to play. All they used to play was like Brothers on the Slide, boom, 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 boom. They used to play all of that stuff and nothing else. Hang Up Your Hang-Ups, Herbie Hancock. That's all they used to play. And they used to let me jam with them.
I love that.
The first time I ever jammed on stage, the guitarist just walked away from the bar, came up to me. I was like 16, and he just ordered himself a drink, and he said, "You need to go upstage and play." I went, "Why is that?" He said, "Because you're doing it." And he made me do it, and I fucking shit my pants, man. But I'm forever grateful, because it got me over that hump. And I mean, that's all I still want to do now. If I could, I'd just join a funk rare groove covers band and just do that and be totally happy for the rest of my life.
I actually missed Samande. I think we call him Samande. Brothers on, they played at Coco in Mornington. What is it? It's right next to Camden.
That's right. Yeah, Coco.
Mornington
Crescent?
Is it that Mornington?
Mornington Crescent, isn't it?
That's it. And they played there, and I didn't see them. I kind of kicked myself for not seeing them, because they're another awesome funk group from the 70s that was sample fodder for lots of other hip hop groups, and that's how I came to know who they are.
I think that's what, again, I think when I finally got into hip hop, it was probably the late 90s, is that I realised that a lot of the stuff they were doing was using samples from those albums that no one really would have known of, because like you'll know, because you're a vinyl freak as well. They did there was so many albums with great funk tracks on it, and then they just disappeared into nowhere. There'd be like Joyce Williams. Like there's a track by Joyce Williams God, the first thing I do in the morning, and the last thing I do at night. She did that track, and that was it. Never heard of her again. She's probably selling shoes in Delaware somewhere. I don't know, but fucking. That's maybe another thing to do next time we get together. Maybe talk about like the history of funk and rare groove and these, like the names of those bands. Mandrill. And if you see the cover of a Mandrill album, it's the gayest thing you've ever seen in your life. I'm sure Mandrill is a euphemism.
Yeah, I got a Mandrill cover, or I got a Mandrill record. It's just got a monkey or a gorilla on the cover, with no real explanation of why it's there. Just
none necessary,
yeah.
none required. Is there a train by you?
There is. There's a few trains that run by me because I'm right there is the Fraser River, and I'm in a place called Fort Langley, and there's huge, not passenger trains, but
freight trains,
like freight trains, yeah, and they go all the time, and they go through bits that cars go by, and the visibility is not so good, so they blow the horn really heavy to make sure they don't smash into people. So, but it goes all night. And in fact, there's a scene in the Blues Brothers where Elwood says to his brother, how often does the train go by?
Oh, yeah.
And he says, so often that you won't even notice it.
Yeah.
It's kind of the same here.
A friend of mine got an autograph of Dan Aykroyd the other day. He came to London, and she's a big fan of his.
For?
I have no idea, but he rocked up because he's a big like car fan. Dan Aykroyd, he loves cars, he loves driving, and he pulled up in the ex-police car from the Blues Brothers movie with the giant oversized bullhorn on the top, and signed some autographs and like Dan Aykroyd, and then put Elwood underneath. You know, really good natured guy. I should have gone, really. I should have gone, but I don't know why I didn't. I was probably.
I would have checked to see if the lighter was there.
If the what? Yeah, it's the lighter. The Blues Brothers.
Where's your lighter, mate?
The Blues Brothers classic film.
I traded it in for a microphone. Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, you traded it in for a microphone. Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
Until now, I think next time we should dig really deeply into the dark days of hip hop when they started fucking shooting each other, and because
yeah,
that got
that's a whole topic there. All of the stages of hip hop are pretty interesting, but that one was one. It felt like the world got bought into this thing. You know what I mean? And then it almost became, rap music became synonymous with violence in that. And for all those diehard hip hop fans, that's not what it was about. You know, it was about party records and.
But it did completely overtake it, and if you talk to a lot of people now, that's what they associate it with, and it couldn't be further from the truth. The overwhelming body of the hip hop history is the total fucking opposite.
Yeah, I totally agree. Also, too, like for the most part, we might as well mention it because you're British and I'm British, but the British version of hip hop and their take on things has always been interested, but like jungle and drum and bass essentially came out of that. There would be no.
That's true.
The Prodigy wouldn't exist without hip hop, like for sure. They were heavily influenced by hip hop records and taking those hip hop records and making them into high adrenaline dance music. You know what I mean? Like it was kind of a crazy merge of. At that time, you know, again, new technology, new sounds, new records, new everything. It was like, that's a crazy time.
The MCP, if you like, of the late 90s was, because I remember that being a big thing, was the Groove Box. When the Groove Box came out, it was like this weird, it was like a mix of a synthesizer.
The 505.
Yeah, the 505. And
yes.
Get your hands on one. If you can find one, buy it. But people like Tricky and Massive Attack, you're right, it was completely influenced by hip hop, that poor kids from places where fuck all was happening, that didn't really identify with what was going on, could generate this amazing music. Because the other memory that I had of the 90s, which was great about watching this stuff about hip hop, is that I was in bands in the 90s, and We was influenced by Soundgarden and Primus and a lot of that kind of stuff. But my overwhelming memory of it was like the Britpop thing, and I hated the shit out of it because it was harking back to a time that was been and gone, and rightly so.
Yes.
And
Yes.
in a microcosm that kind of ignored all this other stuff that was going around it. And one of like the mantras that I remember hearing when I was in bands back in the 90s was when we used to play Kitty Empire, people would go, yeah, you sound a bit American though, don't you? And my attitude always was, well, everything you fucking play is pretty much from America. You know, you can't get away from it. You're in an indie rock band. What do you think? You fucking made that up, you know? All of the stuff from the 60s was English bands selling American music back to Americans. And they used to say it in this kind of dry, witless way. And really what they meant is, oh, you can actually play your instrument. That's what it was. It was fucking code for we resent the fact that you practiced for a few hours and a few years.
Yeah. And Boddingtons. Like, everyone drank Boddingtons back then. Huh?
Yeah.
What happened to Boddington?
Cream flow beer, mate. There was Caffrey's and Boddingtons. I don't know. It was a sign of the times. I remember clearly standing in Camden with my hair down to my back, with no top on, and I, for once, like, bought a joint off one of those guys that sold drugs on the bridge in Camden. Like, very polite, the most polite drug salesman in the world. And I remember sitting with this dude, and I was smoking a joint with him, and I was looking around, and he asked me like if I was okay or whatever, and I just remember saying to him, looking around again, see all this, mate. This is wrong. This is the beginning and the end. There's something fucking wrong with this. And early in the day, I'd seen Liam Gallagher walk by like a pub that I was drinking in Camden Town, and the whole electric ballroom thing, and everyone it was just horrible. It was just really, really horrible. I think that's episode 2. We're gonna pull the 90s apart, and what the fuck happened? What happened?
We're going to pull the 90s apart and shit on it.
It's all it.
We're going to definitely on the 90s.
All right, then,
All right,
Joe
brother.
Watts, thank you very much for being on episode 1.
Oh.
And,
No worries. Thank you for having me. That was an emotional exercise.
Yeah, going through your childhood. And I hope people enjoy it, and I will see you next time. Lots of love to you in Vancouver.
All right, brother. Peace.
Peace. Love you, man.
Love you, man.
Here's a disc jockey who got too mellow for his own good.